We've been through 12 more adaptations of A Christmas Carol this season, and now that Christmas has come and gone, it's time for yet another wrap up. Stick with me as I talk about some overarching themes, comments, questions, and everything else as we wrap up season 2 of Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast. It's one of the most influential books ever written. Even if you've never read Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, you are familiar with it. My name is Colin Murr, and I've loved this story for as long as I can remember. I'm going to be looking at every film and TV adaptation of A Christmas Carol I can, because I love the story that much. Join me this season as I go from Mickey Mouse to the Muppets on Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast. Season 2 wrap up. Well, quick as it may seem, this season has come to an end. Talked about everything from Mickey Mouse to the Muppets, from the 1980s all the way up until 1992 when Muppet Christmas Carol came out, and that was quite a lot for one season. In terms of the years covered, it was far fewer than the first season, where I went from 1935 all the way up to 1979. But in terms of things to talk about, we had just as much, because, as I mentioned, this is the era of A Christmas Carol that has the highest number of iconic versions. Really just a 10, 11-year period, and we get four of the most iconic versions of the story. Mickey, Muppet, Scrooged, George C. Scott Christmas Carol. That's four in a decade, and I think you're not going to find another decade where that's the case. Two in the 30s, pretty well liked. You got the one in the 50s, of course. You get a couple in the 70s, couple in the 60s, but I don't even think some of the versions I covered in the first season are as iconic as what I covered here. Obviously, the Alistair Sim one, and others that are very well regarded by people today. But when you're looking at most known versions of A Christmas Carol, it's going to be a lot from this decade. So I really thought this era deserved its own season. I think it was the right decision. Also got to talk about some lesser known ones from this era too, which is nice because they're kind of all over the place. But sometimes you find hidden gems, interesting things, all kinds of stuff. You never know what you're going to discover. And even though I think I know a good bit about A Christmas Carol, plenty of this is new to me as well. I have not seen every version of A Christmas Carol. I go into many of these blind, and I'm usually pretty open about which ones I haven't seen before. So I'm on this journey with all of you. So before we get to questions, comments, season summary, everything else, like last season, I want to cover one little correction I need to make. I think I mentioned this in the video description as well, but in my episode on Scrooge's Rock and Roll Christmas, I talked about the absolutely awful cover of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas that had some added lyrics not in the original. Very, very simple. Christmas future is far away, blah, blah, blah. And Mike Love sings the song. And without looking it up, I just credited those lyrics to Mike Love. Normally would look up, hey, where did those lyrics originate from? Or who added them? Maybe it's credited somewhere. I shouldn't have assumed, but I did, because Mike Love has a history of doing that kind of thing. His version of Under the Boardwalk haunts my nightmares. He often adds very simplistic lyrics to classic songs, so it felt par for the course for him. But make it right, I did not look it up, and I should have. It's also in the Carpenters version of the song, as Vanity Wild pointed out to me. So Mike Love did not originate those lyrics. As I said, on this season, I covered 12 versions of A Christmas Carol. So, like on the first, I'm going to kind of group them together regarding how I feel about them. At the very top, the one great, truly great adaptation of this season, and the one that is my favorite of all Christmas Carol adaptations, A Christmas Carol 1984 with George C. Scott. This is the adaptation for me, my absolute favorite. The performances are just phenomenal. The script adapts the book wonderfully, and there's really no flaws at all. There are some things that maybe I'd say, oh, I would have done that a little bit differently with maybe Marley, but they're really minor. And once the other ghosts get going, it's just perfect all the way through. Every single actor in past, present, and future, just fantastic. Actors in one scene doing incredible, incredible work. That couple under the bridge. Joanne Whalley as Scrooge's sister. Lucy Gutteridge as Belle in her two scenes. Just Everyone is just really turning in top tier material here. And it's just such a well acted movie. It looks great, shot on location. It's just a masterpiece. I absolutely love it, as you know. That's the one great adaptation this season. But I will say, right below that, we have two adaptations that I would call very good: Mickey's Christmas Carol and The Muppet Christmas Carol. Two adaptations that are great introductions for kids, and two adaptations that adults can return to and enjoy both for nostalgic purposes and simply as a good adaptation of the story. Mickey is only 25 minutes long, but it keeps the basis of the story, has good comedy, has great voice acting. Alan Young is a fantastic Scrooge McDuck as Scrooge, all pretty well cast, good ghosts, keeps what you have to keep. So, Mickey's Christmas Carol, obviously very good. Muppet Christmas Carol as well. Talked about that in the last episode, had some guests who would call it their favorite version, I'm sure. But Muppet Christmas Carol, very, very good adaptation as well, and a wonderful Michael Caine performance, of course. So, yeah, one that I say is great, two I'd say are very good, and then two more I would say have high highs and low lows. More on the high highs end. That's Scrooged and John Grin's Christmas. There are some major issues I have with both of these, but still, if you're looking for Christmas Carol adaptations, looking for something new, check both of these out. Scrooged and John Grin's Christmas. They both have really heartfelt moments. You got Robert Guillaume and John Grin's Christmas, directed, starred, gives a really, really solid performance as John Grin, the Scrooge-like toy executive. And Scrooged has some really wonderful moments, particularly that ending scene. And a lot of the stuff with the ghost is really fun and creative in that. So yeah, as I said, low lows in those as well. John Grin's Christmas has that weird orphanage scene with like a sitcom theme song, and it's just kind of flat looking until you get to Yet to Come, which is really fun. Scrooged, really mean at points, and I think it's inconsistent throughout, but great, great stuff in Scrooged as well. So five that I think are great, very good, or have high highs at least. And that's a little over half of this season's output. So again, like with last season, I tend to be pretty particular about this. I'm not just going to say, oh, it's an adaptation of A Christmas Carol, it has to be good, because that's really not the case. Those are the five. But after that, I would say we have four that are just fine. Nothing really stands out, but nothing wildly offends either. One exception there, I suppose. A Christmas Carol 1982, the Australian one. Bah Humbug, the story of Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol. Scrooge's Rock and Roll Christmas, and A Magic Kingdom Yuletide Special. The last of those, really not an adaptation of A Christmas Carol, but I included it. If you like Disney park stuff, watch that. Otherwise, it's probably not for you. Scrooge's Rock and Roll Christmas does have some very low moments, but you know what? It's bad, but it's also just so goofy, silly, and ridiculous. Like, you're gonna have a good time with how ridiculous it is, and it does have that one really great musical moment. So I can't hate it. I should because it's not good, but it's so silly. I bump it up to this tier because it's not trying to be anything else but what it is, and that's fine. It's just a whole bunch of musical performances, and you'll have a laugh if nothing else. So yeah, Bah Humbug, the story of Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol, should have been one thing or another. Ends up being part documentary, part reading. Interesting curiosity. And Christmas Carol 1982, which, as you'll hear when I get to the comments, it does have some very devoted fans, which is wonderful. I wanted to hear from them because I've always wondered with these lesser known ones, did kids grow up watching these? And I'm sure with almost everyone they did. So it's great to hear that. For me, it just kind of lands like another sort of dully animated Christmas Carol. But it's still fine. It still follows the text often pretty closely. And then we have the three that I would say are just plain bad. Had some of these last year. We've got some again. A Christmas Carol 1991. Painful, painful attempts at comedy. Again, I don't know if this was a dub of a serious version or it was just someone trying to be funny and animating it too. But oh, it's bad. I watched it, really didn't like it, but the more I had to write about it and think about it, it just drove me up a wall. Really not a fan of that. Buccaneers or Scrooge. Uh, Kind of hard to know where to rank this because am I ranking it just by do you enjoy it when watching it? Which I mean, I don't. But It also loses so many points for just outright plagiarism, but does that mean it's the bottom? I don't know. There are other ones I'd rather watch less than even Buccaneers or Scrooge, so it's not quite the bottom of the barrel for all time, but it does steal the most. And Brer Rabbit's Christmas Carol. I mean, it's Brer Rabbit's Christmas Carol. What are you supposed to say? It's just nothing. It's an absolute nothing of a special, and it goes for an hour, trying to be the 50th episode of a TV show, despite being the second TV special in a series. Such a pointless exercise. But again, with all of these, I have to imagine there are people who are nostalgic for them, and you know what? We all have things we're nostalgic for. That's great. If you grew up with any of these, and I'm always happy to hear from you. I don't mean this sarcastically. I don't want to make fun of someone who grew up with it. I'm serious. I want to hear about childhood memories growing up with any of these. So many Christmas carols out there, and we're all going to have our favorites. But for me, one great, two very good, and two with very high highs. We'll talk about some themes I caught on to in this era. Did this in the first season as well, but we're talking about a much more condensed era here. So, one thing that you really catch in this era is sincerity. You've got, in multiple cases, groups of characters taking on a Christmas carol. Mickey Mouse, the Muppets, and playing it completely straight. There are jokes, sure. There are humorous moments, but it's not really a comedy. I talked about this in my episode with Joe Baccia Jr., where we talked about sincerity and how that's going to make something more of a classic than just joke, 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 joke. Especially when you're adapting classic literature. And again, A Christmas Carol's a funny book, so keeping humor is very much on brand. But as I think Brian Henson said, he never wanted it to be parody. And that is very clear from watching it with just how sincere it is. And obviously, Michael Caine had the same approach. And yeah, the Mickey Mouse characters do the same thing. It's a really sweet adaptation. They don't downplay poverty with the Cratchits, even though I realize they combine the even worse poverty from the book and kind of put that on the Cratchits, making them almost comedically poor. But it's a 25-minute adaptation. Like, they do a pretty good job. Even though I had my issues that I broke down in that episode, they still communicate everything you need to communicate pretty well. So, any complaints there are pretty minor due to the fact that it's a 25-minute special. And also Scrooged, where again, people may have expected parody. There's a whole lot of sincerity there to be found. Not perfect. Again, I don't think a lot of the humor lands, but the sincerity of the story really comes through, and a lot of that is because of Karen Allen's performance, who is just wonderful in that film, and Alfre Woodard. The two of them and the way their characters are written and performed really elevate the movie to a degree that maybe it doesn't even deserve, but they are wonderful. And obviously, Bill Murray can bring a lot of sincerity too. I think he really wanted this to be more serious than it ended up being. So I'm not trying to knock his performance in that. Obviously, Richard Donner and he did not get along, and a lot of what we see was apparently Richard Donner's vision of the film. And all the ghosts in that are played pretty straightforward, except the Marley character. But the three ghosts all feel pretty straightforward. Even when they're funny, it makes sense, like the first ghost. So Scrooge has a lot of sincerity too. And yeah, that's why those three work and why the 1991 25-minute quote unquote comedic, big quotes, short doesn't work. It's also not funny. If it were funny, I'd have fewer problems with it. But it just has that really smarmy narrator commenting on everything, and the jokes aren't funny. And as we saw in that episode, again, humor's subjective. If you find it funny, that's great. But as the narrator keeps interrupting, it's just hard to listen to. And there are jokes that don't even make sense. Like the Grateful Dead joke in that. What are they even getting at? I don't know. I tried to figure it out. I'm not confident I gave the right answer, but hey, at least I tried more than they did. Uh, so in the first season, one of the things I talked about was there were often fairly weak and uninteresting Bob Cratchits, particularly in the 50s. And I notice here we have a lot of really, really strong, interesting, well-developed three-dimensional Bob Cratchits. Obviously, when you get a longer film, that's easier to do. David Warner is the definitive take on the character in my mind. That kindness and kindness being his strength. He is a very strong character. He's not meek. He's not a pushover at all. He just knows when to push and he knows what to do. And he and his wife have a really strong relationship in that. Susanna York also wonderful. So David Warner is top of the list for me. But there are so many other great Cratchit characters. Alfred Woodard again and Scrooged playing Grace. And then when you use existing characters, it already lends some familiarity because, like Kermit the Frog, we know Kermit. He's the nice, overworked everyman. Perfect. Couldn't do better. Kermit the Frog, wonderful as Bob Cratchit. And I really, Steve Whitmire as Kermit the Frog, but it's the Muppets. You just say Kermit the Frog as Bob Cratchit. So he's wonderful. And Mickey Mouse in Mickey's Christmas Carol, again, it's the right casting. And Wayne Allwine does a great job there, too. So, yeah, so many good Bob Cratchits. I like Robert Guillaume's son's performance in John Green's Christmas too. I think he's a pretty good take on the Cratchit character, also where he plays Sam. And other Cratchits aren't all that memorable. Ebenezer Scrooge has a puppet, you know. The 1991 film has kind of a throwaway Bob Cratchit too, and same with the 1982 one. So some are forgettable. For the most part, do a pretty good job with Bob Cratchits in this era, and the top tier ones are some of the best we've ever gotten. So yeah, Bob Cratchit as a character has greatly improved from those early versions where he's often just kind of a plot point or just an excuse to show some nice Christmassy scenes. Another character who I think gets really interesting in this era is the Ghost of Christmas Past. This is a character who's always played wildly differently. Barely any two versions are alike, and in this decade, we really get some great ones. Angela Pleasance in George C. Scott version. She's funny and dark and kind and all of that at once, and there's really something off-putting about her performance, which is impressive. It's quite a good performance as the Ghost of Christmas Past, even though she doesn't obviously change faces or anything like the character in the book. You get Jiminy Cricket in Mickey's Christmas Carol, which is a pretty good choice because he was a conscience. I love that uncanny valley-ish puppet in Muppet Christmas Carol, which is that little bit uncanny valley, but not to the point where it makes you distracted or takes you out of the movie. But they used a water tank, I believe, to convey that it was kind of floating, and that works wonderfully. David Johansen in Scrooge, who's just probably the funniest take on this character we've ever gotten. That New York cab driver, he's just perfect. I'm really glad they got him and not not Bobcat Goldthwait, Sam Kinison. There's already enough yelling in that movie. Uh, John Grin's Christmas, you have a great, great Christmas past in that too. So just a real killer's row of Ghost of Christmas Past here. So they really get some good ones. I've talked in the past about, Ghost of Christmas Present is often the most memorable. So obviously there are great ones at that, but that's not new. That's very, very often the case. But of course we get great Christmas presents and Christmas yet to comes as well. Edward Woodward and Willie the Giant. So many great Christmas presents here. But cast is often hit or miss, and I think there's a lot of good ones in this era. Another thing that I'll mention is we do get, even in ones that aren't musicals, we do get some very nice songs and musical moments. So, A Christmas Carol 1984, not a musical. We do get that wonderful opening song, God Bless Us Everyone, which it sounds like a 19th century Christmas hymn, and it's gorgeous, and it has the whole message of the story wrapped up in its lyrics. Love it. Beautiful song. I associate it with Christmas, and anytime I read a Christmas carol, like that song's running through my head because it's a part of a Christmas carol to me. Mickey's Christmas Carol, Oh What a Merry Christmas Day. Another one that it's a not to steal the title of another song, but it feels like Christmas. It's a song that feels like Christmas to me. It's nostalgic, takes me back to that first time I watched it every time. It's great. And Scrooge, the ending with Put a Little Love in Your Heart. Obviously not original to Scrooged, but just a perfect song for that moment. It's fantastic. no matter any issues I have with Scrooge, that moment always gets me when they're all singing that. And yeah, it's really, truly special. And I do laugh one more song from a non musical. The closing number of Brer Rabbit's Christmas Carol cracked me up because it's just listing all the things that happened, but that's neither here nor there. And obviously with the musicals there are some songs I like as well, but I've talked about those already. There are some really, really great songs in this era. Want even more Scrooge A Christmas Carol podcast? Just go to my Patreon at patreon.com/Scrooge A Christmas Carol podcast, where for just $5 a month you can get a bonus episode every month of the year. There I cover various TV shows versions of A Christmas Carol. For $10 a month, you can even vote on what episode I do next. Additionally, for just $1 a month, you can get all episodes 24 hours early. Again, just go to patreon.com/Scrooge A Christmas Carol podcast or follow the link in the description. Okay, I have received plenty of comments, responses, questions, anything else, and I'm going to go over some of these here from social media, YouTube, Spotify, etc. In regards to the 1984 Christmas Carol, David on Blue Sky says, "This is my favorite version too. I've already watched it several times this season. It's got my favorite Carol score too, and I fully agree that score is really, really beautiful. I can link that episode again of Totally Red Christmas where they talk to Nick Bicaw about writing it because if that score interests you, they have a lot of good information on that. So, yeah, that's a really great, beautiful score. And I like how operatic it gets at times. I think it fits the scenes where it does that. Also on Blue Sky, Steven writes, "Finishing your deep dive episodes, and a thought crossed my mind for the first time despite annually rereading this for 30 plus years. Other than an aside to Bob Cratchit, why doesn't nephew Fred have any emotion linked to Scrooge's death? Odd in retrospect." I think this is a great question. Thank you for the question. And I have a couple thoughts on this. The one I lean towards most likely is that the ghost is deliberately withholding this information from Scrooge. He has to manipulate it a bit to give Scrooge the maximum emotional punch. If he actually gives Scrooge what he wants, that makes it too easy. Instead, we get to hear about Fred being nice to Bob Cratchit in the Cratchit scene. So I do tend to think Fred would be grieving his uncle's death, particularly due to the fact that he didn't get to do more in his life. And obviously, just he would miss his uncle, because he does go to him at least once a year. We don't know how often they see each other outside of that, but at least once a year, he does drop by the office to invite him. We know that's an annual thing, so he would absolutely be sad, in my opinion. The other option is that perhaps Fred has given up on Scrooge. I don't think the book ever suggests this would happen. Fred seems to be rimming with Christmas cheer. Obviously, he's not a parody. He knows who his uncle is, but he does this anyway, which makes me think he would never give up on this. There are versions, at least one I can think of, that suggests this will be Fred's last year doing this. I don't think that's the character in the book. So if we're talking in the book, no, I think Fred would be very sad that his uncle has died, and the ghost is deliberately not showing that to him. But it's absolutely an interesting question because, yes, that is one person, perhaps the only person, who would actually genuinely be grieving Scrooge's death. So it's a great question. I've thought of that as well. Also on Blue Sky, Jackie Jacks commented on my video and episode about the adaptation meter. She said she would personally add two things to any comparison of these plot points, and she says in the Marley scene, the line "it is required of every man" is really important. It touches her soul every time. And more than that, the whole "business mankind was my business" speech. That's a deal breaker for her. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Mankind was my business. That is absolutely one of the key lines in the book. I don't have lines of dialogue in my adaptation meter, but I do think that I could have included perhaps something about Marley saying I needed to look out for mankind. I think, yeah, sometimes his regret is not played well enough. Like in the 1982 version, the Australian version, his regret is more, I didn't have a wife and kids. Like, that's sad, sure, but It needs to be that you weren't looking out for other people. And the same user commented that in the 1983 Mickey's Christmas Carol, the gravestones have some names written on them. One says Gladys Knight and the Pips, one says R.I.P. Bob Wills, the king of something, and one says Warren somebody. And this was something I looked into because I was vaguely familiar with this idea, but I couldn't remember where I'd read it. And one of the DVDs, at least, makes it very clear, and I'm sure the original theatrical print, you could see this in the theaters, and I think it's also in the Disney Plus cut, where it has these names. If it's Bob Wills, it has to be the King of Swing. That was his moniker. He was a musician who had died well before this came out, but they apparently wanted to include him. The other one appears to be actor Warren Oates, who's in the Heat of the Night and Badlands. He was an actor, civil rights activist. He died in 1982, which makes more sense when they were making this. No idea about the Gladys Knight thing. I don't even begin to understand why that's there. She is still alive, I believe, and definitely wouldn't have been dead when this was out, so no idea why Gladys Knight and the Pips are there. And they weren't broken up at that point. So if they had broken up the year before, like I could see that being a joke for somebody, but they weren't broken up. So must have been some kind of joke amongst the animators. People do that kind of thing, in passing, you see something in writing and it's just an animator joke. Disney has a history with that, obviously. If you know the thing about the rescuers, it's not something written, it's something visual in the original print of the rescuers that flies right by and it's been cut from all future home releases. So, okay, those are the ones from Blue Sky. I'll get to the YouTube comments now. One about a previous version I reviewed, but I think this comment's interesting. Vanity Wild said on my video on An American Christmas Carol with Henry Winkler, I've never seen this, and by the title I assumed it was American Exceptionalism Propaganda. Yeah, I had never really considered that with the title, but that totally makes sense, especially because I've reviewed An American Carol, very similar in title, to An American Christmas Carol, and that is American Exceptionalism Propaganda. Don't get those two mixed up. American Carol, yes, it is. And I thought about that. And yeah, I fully agree that An American Christmas Carol might not be a very good title. It's kind of generic, even if you put aside everything else. And I think the title suggests that it's not going to be a faithful adaptation, too, because, like, oh, we're Americanizing this. But it's actually really in line with the book's themes, as well as any version from that era, even though it's about Benedict Slade and it's about the American Depression. And yeah, it's really interesting, but I can totally see why the title would put you off. I was wondering what should they have called it? Maybe just a New Hampshire Christmas Carol? That's where it's set. Maybe just like Benedict Slade's Christmas Carol. That's not as good though. Or a Depression Christmas Carol. That I don't know that they really want to put the word depression in the title of a movie if it's going to sell. Yeah, I can totally see why that name would put you off. I had never considered that really, but absolutely. They should have called it something different. I can't believe I hadn't thought of that before because they really kind of dropped the ball with the title there. But that's one of the only weak parts about it. It's a great movie. Hasey, the Sledge Storyteller, commented on the 1982 Christmas Carol from Australia. I was about 9 years old when I first saw this, and after confusion over Mr. Magoo, only because I had never heard of A Christmas Carol and I had no idea why Mr. Magoo was called Scrooge, totally fair. It was the first one where I got a full grasp of the story and what it was all about. I always loved Marley and the other three ghosts, which mostly, except the impossible past, solidified my understanding of what defined them. And you can check out his channel as well because he does his own reviews. He has a review of this one as well, which he mentions in the comment. Yeah, thank you for commenting. I really am glad to hear that this one struck a chord with some people. I already mentioned in the past that I had a Blue Sky user who also grew up with this and it really stuck with him. So, yeah, it doesn't work for me that much, but I'm really glad to hear that it does for so many people, especially kids who grew up with it, because it can be hard for me to judge. If I were a kid seeing this, what would I think? Because I can remember what I liked then, but something might have worked for me then that I might not think would now. So it's really nice to hear that version worked for so many people. Because clearly there was a lot of passion and love put into it. It was adapted by someone who liked the story a lot. I think Ron Hadrick does a good job as Scrooge. So yeah, that's very nice to hear from him and the user on Blue Sky as well, that this really did land for a lot of people. So thank you. On Scrooged, we have Dennis Lancaster 9999 who said, went opening day to see Scrooged. The theater was packed with an enthusiastic audience. The absolute cruel meanness of Murray was pretty off putting, and the laughter started to trickle away. It only really came back when Carol Kane appeared. During the ending, when Murray was ranting and raving, the audience sat pretty quiet and shifted uncomfortably under their seats. It was not unlike going to a family holiday get together, at which one of the relatives starts going off the rails. You just sit there, shifting in your chair uncomfortably, not wanting to offend this relative and praying that they don't come and start hugging on you. Thank you for your comment and sharing that experience because I had a guest on that episode who also saw Scrooged in theaters and had a wonderful experience with it. So I'm glad to hear both sides of that. I was always wondering how this played to audiences when it came out. I knew that critically it was very split. So I'm not surprised that audience wise it was too. And I do have to agree with his speech at the end being kind of like a relative who's maybe going a little too far. I think it's a really good comparison. That's why it doesn't quite work for me. I like that it's a little unhinged. I wish it had been reined in a little more and kept specific parts of the message. So yeah, I do agree with that, and I think the meanness is just too much. So yeah, I agree. Even though there are things about that movie I love. Vanity Wild again commented that he watched the reading with James Earl Jones and Martin Sheen, and he said that the way that Jones read it didn't quite work for him. His voice just threw him off. And yeah, that was my feeling too. I like James Earl Jones. Probably a little too powerful for this, and he didn't think the performance from Sheen as Marley really worked either. I liked it, but I totally get it. A reading is going to feel a whole lot different than performance in a play or a movie. He said there needed to be more of a quote, dire sense of urgency. And yeah, I think that's very true. There wasn't much urgency here. It was very laid back. And I think Marley does need to have that sense of urgency of, like he says, I don't know how much time's left. And yeah, Marley needs that. And I do agree, it's not really in the Martin Sheen reading. That's totally valid. So on Muppet Christmas Carol, Lawyer B. Douglas 2 said, just finished watching. I appreciate your impartial review. This one is in my top two, and it was great to hear your perspective. People get very protective over this one, and especially the Sim one, which I actually don't enjoy. So it was great to listen to your point of view as always. Yeah, thank you for saying so. And I was a little worried about how people would receive my Muppet Christmas Carol thoughts, even though I am confident they were well thought out. And they're still mostly positive. It's a movie I like quite a bit, but I do know that in certain circles, saying anything negative about that might be a bad look. So really appreciate that. And I really appreciate that you commented that you don't enjoy the Sim version, which in Christmas Carol circles might be even bolder to say than that things in the Muppet one don't work for you. So yeah, hey, enjoy what you enjoy, admit what you don't enjoy, it's fine. Just, be kind about it, be thoughtful about it, and I think we'll all be good. Everyone's gonna have their favorite versions, as you know. There are countless versions. Enjoy what you enjoy. Different things are gonna work for different people. And this is from Paul Frentzos on Spotify. Hey, been loving your podcast. I'm a big fan of A Christmas Carol as well. You may already know, but Robert Eggers is in the process of making an adaptation. Did you hear about this? I'm very excited. I went and I saw Nosferatu last year, and while I was watching, I thought to myself, this guy could make an awesome version of A Christmas Carol. And about a month later, I heard rumors that he was working on a script. I just saw last night on Letterboxd that it's in the works officially. Thank you so much, Paul, for that comment. I have heard this. I briefly tweeted about it or posted about it on Blue Sky or both a while back, but it's been quite some time. And yeah, I am very excited about that. Robert Eggers is a wonderful director. If you listen to my 25 favorite movies of the 21st century so far, I had The Witch, his first movie, very high on that list. And I've enjoyed everything he's done. The Witch is still my favorite. That is a brilliant folk horror character study with really some of the most unsettling stuff in horror in the last 25 years. Just, it's an amazing film. It's a folk tale set in 17th century America, and it feels like a story that Puritans would tell around a campfire. It's just wonderful. But it's not the only film of his I love. The Lighthouse, amazing two-hander with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, deeply unsettling psychological horror. The Northman, more of a historical epic, but through the very specific lens of Robert Eggers, and it feels like a horror story, even though it might not technically be one. And then Nosferatu, the remake of the silent classic, which I am a big fan of every version of Nosferatu. Not every version of Dracula, but every version of Nosferatu specifically. that I've seen, which is the original, the Werner Herzog remake, which is just one of my favorite films of all time, period. Shadow of the Vampire, which is a fictionalized movie about the making of the original, and then the Eggers one. I think there's one other sort of like experimental remake that I haven't seen, so I can't review that one. I think it has Doug Jones in it. But of the four I've seen, I'm a fan of all Nosferatu's. Robert Eggers' film was really, really beautiful, great performances. I liked it a lot. And yeah, if he's making a Christmas Carol, I am all for that. I am excited no matter what he announces, honestly. I would love to see him say, hey, I'm going to make another original film. I'm sure he will someday. His original films are great. Again, The Witch is still my favorite. I know he looks back on that and says, I could have done so many things so much better. And that's any artist, right? You're going to look back on your early work and say, I just see the mistakes, which makes perfect sense. But oh, that's a wonderful film. But yeah, he really is obsessed to a good degree. I think it's for the best that he does this. He loves period detail. He loves getting things right, the look and the feel specifically of a period. And not in a vague sense, but like the lighthouse is set in the late 19th century with two lighthouse keepers. So they dress like lighthouse keepers and they sound like nobody would ever sound today. And you can just smell them through the screen, and it's just a wonderful film. So I'm doing a Christmas Carol, I think. Yeah, that excites me because he does horror really well. I think A Christmas Carol has a lot of great horror moments. There are some people who, if I hear they're doing A Christmas Carol, I worry they might not do the light enough. They might just do the darkness. But I think Eggers understands that balance. Now, if you watch something like The Witch, there's not a light to be let in that story, and that's fine. But in something like The Northman, there is some light in that story. In Nosferatu, there's some light in that story. So yeah, I think he will balance it really well. What I'm hearing is that Willem Dafoe will be playing Scrooge. I'm not sure if that's confirmed yet, but I think that'd be great. Willem Dafoe, one of my favorite actors. He's brilliant. And I could totally see him playing both sides of Scrooge, both the grumpy, but not over the top, the grumpy coldness, sadness, and then that pure joy at the end. I think Willem Dafoe would be a wonderful choice. Another regular of his, Ralph Ineson, I could see him playing Scrooge as well. He's been in, I believe, every Robert Eggers film. I think he even has a voice cameo in The Lighthouse. So, but he's in The Witch. He plays the father in that, and he's one of the people trying to stop Orlok in Nosferatu, and then he has a cameo in The Northman as well. So, Ralph Ineson, if I had to guess, he could play Marley, but he could play anything. He's a wonderful actor. I'm a big fan of Ralph Ineson too. So it'll probably be Willem Dafoe as Scrooge. Makes a lot of sense. Dafoe's been in three of Eggers' four films. I was watching an interview with Dafoe a while back. He said, I saw The Witch, and I wrote up Robert Eggers and said, I want to be in anything you make. And he's been in everything he's made since, which is wonderful. Willem Dafoe he loves helping out new talent, joining the crew, the regular troupe of so many directors. He's a Wes Anderson regular. He's a Robert Eggers regular. He's been in so many interesting films by young directors, and I love that about him. He loves to help the next generation along. So he's an incredible actor, and he'd be a great Scrooge. So yes, to answer your question, I am very much looking forward to that. I think Robert Eggers will do a really good job with it. And again, I don't think he'll lean too much into the darkness and not let any light in. I have seen a version or two that does that, but I don't think he's one of those writer directors who's that way. I think he'll nail the light aspect of it too. So, yeah, if that goes forward, I've heard it might not be the next movie he makes. I heard it might be, but whatever comes out about it, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it whenever it comes. It'll be really, really interesting. I'm going to throw in two more questions that I was asked on a radio show recently. I was a guest on Dan Cook's radio show. He is a radio host who follows me on Twitter. He had me on for a brief interview a couple weeks ago, and he asked me two questions, and I figured I'd talk about those here as well. So the one question was, and this was off the cuff, so I was thinking quickly, but also I still agree that this is the answer I would go with. He asked, who's the most underrated character in A Christmas Carol. And that's a tough one because Scrooge is the only character who goes through any kind of change in the book. Everyone else is static. I mean, obviously, yes, Tiny Tim doesn't die, but in terms of character growth, Scrooge is the only one who we see go through any change. We're told that other people change. We're told Father is kinder than he used to be. We're told Jacob Marley has regrets about how he lived his life, of course. But those are characters who, in one case, are only talked about, in another case, only appear in one scene. Scrooge is the only one with an arc. So I think a little bit about this, and he said outside of like the most talked about other characters like Bob Cratchit and uh, Ghost, things like that. So after some thought, and I was considering both the book and adaptations here to be fair, and in some adaptations, characters do have little arcs here and there. But the character who I think about a good bit in relation to how little time they have in the book is the nephew Fred's wife. And she doesn't have a name in the book. In adaptation, she has different names. But I find her character really interesting because we know that Fred is this endless source of hope and joy. Obviously, he knows how his uncle is, but he also wants to change him. He wants him to come around, and he earnestly goes year after year. And I just like thinking about the kind of marriage he must have, which by all accounts appears to be a very good one, where is his wife obviously encouraging him to do this, but I can imagine she also thinks, she'll say like, "Hey, if you stop doing this, if you stop inviting him, I don't blame you." She understands perhaps the realism of it, and I realize a lot of what I'm putting on this character is how I'm reading it through very, very little text. But in my head, this is kind of who she has to be. That someone like Fred can just keep that joy up nonstop. Maybe she's a little more practical about it. I also like the hints throughout that maybe she's pregnant. I think that's some nice subtle writing on Dickens' part, even though he never comes right out and says it. And I do think one reason I consider her kind of an underrated character is I really, really like the portrayal of her in the George C. Scott version. Carolyn Langrish plays, she's called Janet in that version. And she just has that really great scene at the end. She's great in the party scene too, but at the very end with Roger Reese and her, and then George C. Scott, which is just an incredible scene. And you see her completely just melt in that scene. And you get the impression with her portrayal that she always had similar hopes to Fred, that, yeah, maybe he's gonna change. They hadn't obviously met. She hasn't met Scrooge in that version. And I think that's said in the book as well, that they've never actually met. But in that, you see that maybe she wasn't quite as hopeful as Fred, but as soon as Scrooge shows legitimately that he has changed and is going to be kinder to his nephew, you see it all completely melt away in that moment. And she welcomes him into her home, and it's just lovely. So, yeah, I would still say that's a character that I find very interesting. Again, it's hard for me to say underrated because no one really has an arc except Scrooge, but yeah, I think more about that character and who she must be than I do any other character, I think, especially given how little time she actually has in the book. And the other question he asked was, if you were on a desert island, what's one Christmas movie you'd want with you? And obviously, we're talking about Christmas Carol. Talked about my favorite version of A Christmas Carol, the George C. Scott version. I've talked a lot about the Christmas Carol that I love most from 1984, but I was thinking there are, of course, other Christmas movies that I love as well, and I haven't really talked about them too much. So if you're curious, I'll talk about a few other favorites that have nothing to do with the Christmas Carol. I often tend not to go for kind of the traditional classics in terms of Christmas movies. I think there are some that, especially in the last, well, definitely in the last 25 years, but not even saying like the last 40 years, that are trying really hard to be a modern Christmas classic. And I feel like the harder they try, the less successful they're going to be. They really hammer the imagery of like Christmas songs and Christmas decorations and Christmas imagery, and they do it at the cost of story or humor or whatever they're going for, whether it's a drama, comedy. So there's a lot of ones from the last. I'll go as far as 40 years, pretty much, that a lot of people love. They think they're modern Christmas classics, and they just don't do that much for me. But ones that I do love, one of my favorite movies of all time, Black Christmas. Very, very unsettling horror movie from the 70s, directed by Bob Clark, who also did A Christmas Story, which is one of those that I actually don't love. But Black Christmas has a phenomenal cast: Olivia Hussey, Margot Kidder, Keir Dullea, John Saxon. Andrea Martin, just some great Canadian supporting actors in there too. It's really, really dark. The rare movie that really gets under my skin even after watching it multiple times. It's an incredible movie. Just one of my favorite movies, period. I don't really get into the debate of is this not a Christmas movie? Hey, if you like to watch it at Christmas, it's a Christmas movie. Great. I don't care beyond that. But another movie that's kind of set at Christmas, which you know, but need to watch it at Christmas. No, but Eyes Wide Shut is another great movie that happens to be set at Christmas, and I think the celebration of Christmas is somewhat related to the movie. So yeah, I mean, Eyes Wide Shut's obviously a great movie, but I don't associate it with Christmas in the same way. Now, in terms of like the classics, I do think the original Miracle on 34th Street is a great film. It is surprisingly cynical when people think of that title and perhaps even the remake. It's a pretty it has a happy ending, obviously, and everyone does end up pretty much doing the right thing, but it's still a pretty snarky and cynical film. It's that 40s sensibility, which is to its favor. I'm a big fan of the humor in that movie. It's got a bunch of great character performances. And yeah, Edmund Gwenn, obviously, as Chris Kringle, just such a genuine performance in this world of kind of more realistic characters. He comes in as this very sweet man. And it's great. And other ones, I do find some of the Christmas horror movies interesting. Not saying they're masterpieces, but I do like Christmas Evil, which is much more of a taxi driver style character study than its premise would suggest. So that is all the comments and questions for now. Thank you to everybody who reached out throughout this season and before, and who will continue to try to answer them as often as I can. Like I said, the only question that I won't answer is when are you going to cover this? I'm going to cover everything. I'm covering every version of A Christmas Carol. I'm going chronologically. The next big season will be starting where we leave off here. So we ended in 1992. We will at least go through all of the 90s. And we're getting to an interesting point now because this season we covered like what in my opinion are some of the benchmarks of Christmas Carol adaptations. The ones everyone knows. And now we'll be moving into the 90s where there are ones that I think people are probably aware of or they've heard of, but I don't think there's going to be as many ones that like everyone knows. Like everyone knows Mickey, everyone knows Muppets. A lot of people know Scrooge and the George C. Scott Christmas Carol. Obviously, lesser known ones here as well. But moving into the 90s, there's like some animated versions that I know a lot of people have seen, but they aren't household titles in the same way. Or the Patrick Stewart one, which more people know that one because it's a straight adaptation. And the Flintstones one, which I feel like people have seen, maybe they don't remember. So we're getting to ones that have like niche pockets of people who know them well, but not as well as the most famous version. So I think going into the 90s is going to be a very interesting look. And there are also so many more spins on it. Like I know in the 90s we start getting female Scrooges. We start getting a Western Scrooge, I believe. We get more animated. We get a lot more musicals. We were light on musicals this season, but they come back in a big way in the 90s and early 2000s. So, yeah, a lot of different directions as we continue on. Again, that'll be next November and December. That's still a ways off. I don't know exactly what the scope of next season will be. I haven't planned it out yet, but I know the 90s get really interesting. Or I suppose stay really interesting because this season was too. But yes, that's for next season. But for now, we're going to talk a little bit about what I do in the off season. Last year, I did a Christmas Carol deep dive where each month took a portion of the book, played the audiobook, talked about it. And I really love doing that. I know it was really helpful for a lot of people. So, hey, I'm glad I can educate a bit too. And don't have more of that. Obviously, we finished it, but I'm going to do a few different things here. And I'm not quite sure what each month will look like. But for now, I think I'm going to start for the January episode because this episode is dropping on the 31st. So technically, this is still a December episode. So you're going to get a January episode still. For the January episode, I am going to start looking at the silent versions. I've always wondered how should I talk about them? I don't think they were the place to start. I wanted to start with the sound versions. That's really where the legacy of A Christmas Carol on film begins. But there are silent versions, and I want to talk about them somehow. So that's where I'm going to start for the January episode. I don't know how many I'm going to talk about yet and how many episodes it'll take. if I'll do all the episodes consecutively or I'll go on and off, but the Silent Christmas Carol series will be starting. That's one thing I'll be talking about. I think I'm also going to talk about at some point on and off. It won't be all at once because there's many Christmas Carol sequels, books, movies, TV sequels, whatever. There are people who have attempted to continue the story in one way or another through various mediums, and I would like to look at some of those. Again, not all at once, but we'll look at some Christmas Carol sequels. Another thing that I'm curious if people want to hear, and you can please comment and let me know. There are plenty of radio versions of A Christmas Carol, some with very iconic actors. And is that something you would like to hear me talk about? I know we mostly talk about visual adaptations, movies, TV. But would you like to hear me talk about some radio adaptations? There's one with Lionel Barrymore, one with Ralph Richardson. I think there's one with Laurence Olivier, even. They're from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and on up. And again, I'm not quite sure what it would look like. It probably wouldn't just be one per episode because radio is a very different medium than TV or film. But I think I could do some episodes in those if that's something that'd be interesting as well. I'm up for talking about anything related to A Christmas Carol, honestly. So yeah, I might do some radio ones at some point. I've listened to some of them. But yeah, if that's something people want to hear, I will absolutely talk about the radio adaptations. Now, if you're asking about will I cover TV episodes based on A Christmas Carol, you're in luck because that is my Patreon. For $5 a month, you can get bonus episodes where I talk about each month an episode of TV based on A Christmas Carol. So I started with the Jetsons, and I did Family Ties, and then just as this is coming out right around this time, I'll also be dropping my one on Little House on the Prairie. So $5 a month, you can get those bonus episodes. And for $10 a month, join that top tier. You can also vote on which episode I do next. So head on over to my Patreon. Link is in the description. And you can find out more about TV adaptations of A Christmas Carol. Obviously, if it's a TV movie, that is a main podcast discussion. But if it's a TV show doing an episode structured like A Christmas Carol, that's where that's going to go. And I've had a lot of fun doing that. I know we have some subscribers over there who are getting those monthly episodes. So, hey, if you can, join them. I would never tell anyone to donate if it's not available. Times are tough. I get it. Please. Just listening, commenting, liking. That is a big, big help. And like I said, this main podcast will never be behind a paywall. I want everyone to be able to access this. So, yeah, during the year, I will keep you posted on what I will be doing each month. But I might mix it up a bit. It won't be all one thing. If there's something you want me to cover, hey, leave a comment. Anything Christmas Carol related, I'll take it into consideration. I know there's like a video game of A Christmas Carol that I might talk about with a friend of mine. I might do a episode with some friends about all our favorite Muppet movies. Might rank all the Muppet movies because we were talking about other Muppet movies as we were recording for Muppet Christmas Carol, and we just have thoughts about a lot of them. So that could be an episode too. Well, we'll see what happens. It's kind of an anything goes attitude in the off season here, but again, the main meat of the podcast is going to be in November, December. That's when people are listening. So, again, thank you so much for listening to this. Really means a lot that everyone is a part of this. If you're a listener, commenter, subscriber, Patreon backer, all of it. It means a lot. I have a lot of fun doing this, but I couldn't do it without you. So, thank you everybody for listening. And I will be back in January at some point. It won't be the first week of January, but I will have an episode coming in January on the first of the Silent Christmas Carol adaptations. Scrooge, A Christmas Carol podcast is written, edited, and hosted by Colin Murr. Theme music is Christmas Day by TRG Banks. Leaving a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing on YouTube will be a big help to me. You can also back me on Patreon for early episodes, bonus episodes, and the right to vote in polls. Link is in the description. I'll be back next month with another episode of Scrooge Christmas Carol podcast. Until then, make sure to live in the past, the present, and the future, and ensure that the spirits of all three strive within you.